Hi, and welcome to FedScoop TV. I'm Whitney Wyckoff. Here with me today at the Data Information Summit is Joe Pasqua. He's the Executive Vice President of Products at MarkLogic. Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
There's a lot of talk today about open data, big data, transparency, open government, enterprise agility, all kinds of buzzwords.
Right.
So my question to you is, where is the real movement or progress taking place today? Are any of these focus areas really driving the activity when it comes to agencies?
Right. So a lot of those terms get way overused and they kind of lose meaning over time. But they all have a core, an important core to them. And I think in terms of what's having the impact and what's getting used, it's really at the intersection of those things. So when you talk about big data and open data gets really powerful when it's coupled with big data. When you have the ability to have a really large base of open data, that's when it gets interesting. But then what do you need? If you've got all this big data and you want to be open with it, you got to be agile. So that's where the enterprise agility comes into it. And so where I think it really gets interesting is when all of these things that maybe started out as different movements kind of come together and they create synergies that actually allow people to get more benefit from them than they would in any particular area. So having big data in and of itself is interesting, but it's really interesting when you can deal with it agilely and when you can open it up and make it available to people. So it's really that intersection to me, which is where the real progress is happening.
Interesting. Now, data innovation in government is as much of a cultural change as it is about technology. Right. Where is government today in terms of the cultural and attitude changes that are necessary to move to an open data by default approach for data innovation?
Right, right. And this is a challenge not just with government, it's a challenge everywhere. Everybody is going through this cultural shift in understanding what the value is in opening up data and making data available. And so it's a difficult, you're absolutely right, the cultural part is at least as hard as the technology part. It's hard for everybody. I think what's interesting in the federal space is, in a sense, it's harder because in the commercial space, you're doing this because at some point there's a profit motive, right? There's something that's saying, hey, if I create this data, if I package this data, I can monetize it, I can get people using it, I can get people, there's always sort of a profit motive, and you can decide, I'm going to invest in this because it's going to be worth it for me. I'm going to invest in this because it's going to have a big return. So there's always kind of a driving force and a focusing force. I think with government, there's sort of a greater good involved, and the government needs to look at things more broadly than the commercial space does. They don't have a profit motive in the same sense. There's a profit motive in the sense that they're trying to, advance the citizenry and make more data available, advance business by making data available to businesses. And I think that actually, in a sense, makes it more challenging because you have to be kind of more forward-looking in saying, okay, we're going to do this. It's a valuable cultural change to make, and the value is actually going to be derived 2 steps away from us. We're going to make this data available. Companies are going to consume it. It's going to improve the economy. It's going to move things forward. So I think in the federal space and even state and local space, there needs to be even more of a forward-looking mindset in terms of how to get value out of big data and open data.
Interesting. How do you see the worlds of open data, big data, analytics, and mobile coming together? And what are the potential impacts for government services and interagency collaboration?
Yeah, great question. And again, if you think about those things, big data, as we were talking about before, big data supports open data. So if you've got the big data underpinnings, that's going to help you support open data. Where's that open data going to come from? Well, it's coming more and more from individuals. It's being created on mobile devices. It's being consumed on mobile devices. Our mobile devices have tons and tons of sensors in them today. They can tell where you are, how you're moving, you know, what you're doing. They can gather lots of information, and they can also make that information available to you. So I think, again, it's those things together that are really interesting. And then when you ask about what does it mean for, you know, agencies collaborating, I think one of the really great things is that we're going to get to a point, and this gets to, we need to make the investment first, and we have to be forward thinking about that, but we're going to get to a point where interagency collaboration kind of happens by accident, in a sense. In the same way as in the earlier days of the internet, people started building these services, and they built them for one reason, but then people started mashing them up. Once they were there, once you have that out there, people put things together in ways that, you know, wasn't really intended and people didn't really think about. If we get to this place with open data, it's the same kind of thing, where I'm generating this open data. I might have some particular use cases in mind, but another agency can come along and say, wow, that data is incredible if I can combine it with my data and this other data from over here. And all of a sudden I get a data mashup that nobody had ever thought about before. But you have to have all the pieces out there before people can start plucking them and building these integrations. So the cool thing is it decouples the agencies. People don't have to work, you know, really tightly hand in hand to coordinate a big 10-year program that's going to do something. Everybody can make progress in their own areas, make their data open and available, and then other people can benefit from it in ways that didn't need to be anticipated in the first place.
Oh, great. Interesting. Now, looking ahead, given what we've talked about, what are the implications for the next generation of federal IT workers? What experience and expertise do they really need?
Yeah. And again, I would say that in many ways it's not very different from what's going on in the commercial sector. There's a huge demand for data scientists. And frankly, that's another one of these terms that gets used a lot, and there's 1,000 different definitions of it. But in essence, what I'm saying is that we need more people who are trained to think about how to use data. That might be from a, you know, sort of a deep statistical analysis basis. It may be from the other end about, you know, what data is it important to collect? What do we want to study? It can be from the data governance perspective, and this is really important in the federal space too, because all of this data, with all of the great uses it can be put to, it's also got to be managed really carefully, because all of our private information is floating around out there, and we want to make sure that it's carefully controlled. And the other piece of it is that there's this concept of de-anonymization. There's all this anonymized data out there that we can use to draw conclusions from and make results from that doesn't contain our personal information, which is great. But the thing is, with all this data analytics technology, you start putting a piece of information from here and a piece of information from here together, and all of a sudden you can start figuring out, oh, well, I didn't have this person's name, but I can kind of figure it out because, you know, she's the only person who lives in this area at this age, who, et cetera, et cetera. So this whole notion of data governance, definitely important in the commercial space. I think it's going to be super important in the federal space as well. So that's another sort of skill set that I think is going to be important.
Oh, great. Well, thank you so much for joining us today.
Great. It was good to be here. Thank you.
Great, great. I'm Whitney Wyckoff, and you're watching FedScoop TV.